Don't you know, it's getting low, it's getting hot.
Hey, what is up guys? My name is Alex and today I'm bringing you a special collaboration with Chris from Dev Coffee. Together we're going to be building a poll web application using JavaScript. Now the way this is going to work is that in this video I'm going to play for you an hour-long live coding session I recorded last night in which I build an API on the Node.js platform and publish it to GitHub. Chris in his video is going to pick up where I left off and also do a live coding session where he builds a React.js user interface on top of the API endpoints that I've provided. At the end of both videos we're going to be pushing the code to a public GitHub repository, so if you're interested in checking out the code, you can. The link for the code is going to be in the description, as well as a link to Chris's channel and his video. In fact, there are going to be all kinds of links in the description to the various tools that I use throughout this video, because really the main reason we think you might want to watch a video like this is they're essentially inviting anybody who wants to kind of look over our shoulder as we build a real application. You'll get to see the tools that we use and how we approach certain problems. For instance, in this video I'm going to be using Vim and Tmux, which I think a lot of people will be interested in seeing. Also, throughout the development of the server, I'm going to use a variety of Node.js modules including Express, Sequelize, Babel, ESLint, and a few other bits and bobs that you'll see throughout the video. If that sounds like something you're interested in, if you want to see those technologies in action and see how we approach problems, please watch on and enjoy.
Alright, let's get started. I've already made a directory for the project. Right now it's empty. This is ultimately going to be a Git repository, so I'm going to write git init. I'm also going to want to generate a git ignore file. To do that I use this utility called Joe. You can find a link to that in the description, it's really cool. But to be honest, in this case I think it's generated more information than is necessary. I like to keep my files as minimal as possible, so I'm going to remove everything I don't anticipate needing. In particular, all I really care about is ignoring the node modules directory and any files that end with log, like the npm debug log that often surfaces. Okay, next I'm going to create a package.json file using npm init, and again, these tools tend to generate more fields than are really necessary. These fields are useful if you intend to publish to npm or something, but because this is a server application, there's really no need. Next, I'm going to set up ESLint, and I'll tell you right now that the next probably 8 to 10 minutes are going to be spent on setting up the project. I'm going to install ESLint, which is a linter, and I'm also going to need to find on the internet, I guess, the ESLint standard config plugin. It's not necessarily the de facto plugin, it's just called standard. It's trying to define a standard style for JavaScript that isn't super opinionated. But essentially this plugin will in a part enforce a certain style guide for the application, which means me and Chris will have the same sort of style of code, which should make the code really consistent. What I really like about this particular ESLint plugin, of which there are many by the way, there are ones from Airbnb and Google and so forth, but what I like about this one is that in the README I can just copy and paste these commands and entries for the ESLint RC file, and just as I've been talking I've pretty much finished. If I open a file, well create a file like app.js, I just want to test real quick to see if ESLint has been installed. Yes, everything seems to be working fine. As you can see it says extra semicolon at the bottom there. That I wouldn't get that error unless I had this standard plugin installed. So let's just close that file for now and remove it because it was only there for the sake of testing that. Something I'm going to do just real quick is put my terminal in full screen. I prefer to code like that. I'm also going to attach to a Tmux session and I'll call this window Vim. Right, so we've got ESLint set up, that's pretty good. I'm also going to want to set up Babel, and when working with a Node.js server, the way I like to use Babel is using the Babel require, or rather the Babel, I think it's called the require hook, yeah. Where basically you take this module and you install it as a regular dependency, usually Babel and so forth or developer dependencies like tooling, but in this case we need to reference it from the actual server code, so it's a proper dependency. I'll let that install because I'm also going to need to grab a Babel preset. The Babel preset I like to use with Node 5 is called Babel Node 5 preset, something like that. I just tend to search for it and I think it's by a guy called Lee Benson. Yeah, this is the one. And again, really simply, I love how readmes have these commands I can just copy and paste. It's so convenient. This is going to be a regular dependency. I'll install it real quick. And whilst that's installing, oh, I meant to call this window shell, not vim. I'll rename that shell and create another window for vim. This way I can switch between the windows. I can run commands here, then switch to vim and, for instance, open package.json. And what I need to do in order for Babel to recognize this preset, I need to add an entry to either a Babel RC file, or in this case, I'm just going to put it inside of package.json, which is perfectly okay. It's an alternative way of pretty much expressing the same thing. Hopefully now, I should be able to create a directory called bin, and inside that directory, inside of what I'm going to call the dub script, I can require Babel register just by pasting it, and then I can require the script that contains my application, which I think I haven't made it yet, but I think what I'm going to do is put it into a folder called server, and we'll call it app.js, although you don't need to specify the extension with common.js. And while I'm here, I'm going to change that from double to single quotes and remove the semicolon. So basically any files that you require after Babel register will be transpiled using the Babel preset, and it's so easy. I'm also going to create a script inside of package.json called starts. And when I run the start script, I want to call node. I want to go to the bin directory and run that dub script. Let's see if that works. Well, actually, there's no code. Okay, so yeah, let's make the server directory, and then we'll open server/app.js. And even though Node 5 supports a good portion of ES 2015 features, it doesn't support the import syntax, so we'll be able to test if our Babel setup is working by using a feature that Node 5 doesn't otherwise support. So let's save the file. At this point, I'm getting a bit tired of opening and closing vim, so I'm just going to start using my tmux windows. I'll write node run start, and hopefully, okay, let's just have a look here. I think there's a problem with my script. Yeah, I meant to write, oh, hold on a second. Oh, sorry, I meant npm run start, not node run start, sorry. And as you can see, the program didn't really print anything, but that's actually a good thing. It means an error didn't occur. I don't really need this import statements anymore, so I can remove it. Although, to be honest, the next step really is probably to install Express. So let's start installing Express and create a simple Express server here, just to make sure that Express is actually set up and running. So whenever anybody tries to get any routes using that star, that symbolizes every route, we'll just send the text hello. I'll create a constant for the port because I'm going to reference it twice. Once as the argument to listen, and once inside the callback within a template string, I think. So we'll say running on port, and then we'll reference the port number. Now if we need to change the port, we only have to do it in one place. Nice and convenient. I'm getting an error. Just going to point this out right now. You might see all kinds of errors happening. That's because this particular ESLint config is quite picky. It says here, for example, no multiple empty lines, which means I need to remove the second empty line there. Express should have finished installing by this point, and if I run npm run starts, we see the message running on port 3000, and if I go to my browser and I'll just go to localhost :3000, we see the text hello. That confirms that Express is running nicely. One thing I'm going to do before we really delve into writing the actual code for the project is I'm going to create another script. This time I'm going to install a module called Nodemon. I want to create a script called dev that's going to watch these source files for changes, and when they get updated, it will automatically restart the server. That's going to save me from having to keep stopping and restarting the server, which is kind of tedious. So if I remember correctly, I think the arguments are W, which is the directory to watch. We'll specify the current directory, and then I think it's X or --exec. I'll go for X to specify the command to run, which in our case is going to be npm run start. Okay, this happens to me all the time. You see how it says this file has been changed since reading it? It's because when I ran npm install, it wrote an entry to the dev dependencies field in the package.json file, and I've tried to overwrite it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line, run the edit x command to reload the file, and that will include the Nodemon dependency we added implicitly through npm. I'll paste that. I'm speaking ahead of myself, but if I paste that now and save the file, hopefully if I go back to the shell window and run npm run dev, we should see the Nodemon output, And yes, we see that we're running on port 3000. If I, for example, just to give you guys a little demo here, if I change the port number to 3001 and save the file, as soon as I switch to that other tmux window in the bottom right there, I'm running on port 3000. That's pretty awesome. Okay, so I guess the next thing really is to set up the database. And to do that, we're going to install a few node modules. Let me say, by the way, that for the database, I'm going to be using MySQL through Sequelize. Although, really, I feel like I have a bit of an ulterior motive in that regard. I suspect that the best or most appropriate database solution for this particular kind of application would be some kind of NoSQL database, particularly Redis. I think Redis would probably be perfect for this application, but because I have experience with Sequelize and I myself have made some screencasts about Sequelize, I feel like it's appropriate to use Sequelize for this application. So I'm going to start by installing Sequelize, the MySQL driver, and I'm also going to use a module that I haven't mentioned in my Sequelize videos yet, called Sequelize-Connect. This module allows you to access your Sequelize connection and models from any file within your project through virtue of the singleton design pattern, I believe. The implementation is fairly simple, but it's nice to use a module. Really, I suppose the first thing I should do is connect to the database. So I'm going to import db from Sequelize-Connect. And by the way, if you were wondering why I just killed the command on accident, sorry. But if you're wondering why I get auto-completion like that as I type these commands, it's because I've written them previously for other projects and my terminal remembers that and prompts me to auto-complete because it's something I do so frequently. These three modules are my go-to data access modules. Anyway, whilst that's installing, I'll import db, which is the Sequelize-Connect module, and I'm going to create an async function called connect. And instead of this function, I'm going to await the results of the promise that the db.connect function returns. And to this function, I pass, I believe, if I remember the arguments correctly, the username. Oh, sorry, no, it's going to be the schema first. We haven't created the database schema yet, but I'll create one in a second, and I'll call it andvote_schema. The database username is root, and I don't have a password for my local MySQL instance because there's nothing of consequence inside that database. Right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an immediately invoked function expression, which is also asynchronous. So we define a normal function, right, and then we invoke it immediately. And you have to do that if you want to use the await keyword within a sort of entry point like this. You can't just use await outside of a function. That's just the way it is. So I'm going to await the result of calling connect, and after that's finished, I'm going to run all this code. I don't expect this code will work off the bat. Oh, for one thing, we've got a little bit of a syntax error. Okay, so actually that's not an actual valid error. It says unexpected token function. There's nothing wrong with this code, but put simply, ESLint does not recognize the async and await keywords. So we're going to have to make a little bit of a change to our config here. We're going to need to bring in, I think, a module called Babel ESLint or something like that. Yeah, this one here called Babel-ESLint. We'll take the package name. Oh, it's just easier to type it. So we'll say nid, that means npm install dev, by the way, babel-eslint. And then we go to the ESLint config file, and I think all we have to do is specify a parser field and set it to babel-eslint. I'm not positive that's correct, just while that's installing. Yeah, let me just see and make sure it's correct. It is. So hopefully now if I go back to that file, app.js, and resave it, ESLint will kick in, and okay, we still have an error, but it's a different error. We just need to put a space before the parenthesis there and everything is valid. So yeah, as I was saying before we encountered that, this code won't really work. Let's run the dev script and see what happens. We get an error. It says no such file or directory /model. And what's happening there is this Sequelize-Connect module is looking for some models to import, but it can't even find a model directory yet. We haven't made one, obviously. I'll add one in a second, but just while it's on my mind, I'm going to create a little try-catch block around the connect function, because if something else goes wrong, I want to make sure that the error isn't swallowed. That would be really frustrating. So I'll say an error occurred when connecting, and then I'll specify the error. Okay, let's create the modules, or excuse me, the models folder now. So I'm going to create a new folder called models, and inside of it, I'm going to create a new file called poll.js, and I'm going to create another file called polloption.js. Obviously, we'll be storing the polls and the poll options in separate tables and defining a reference between them via a foreign key. I'm going to open both files, and I'm going to try and pull up the Sequelize Connect documentation. Totally did a typo there, but never mind. Just because I don't exactly remember the syntax offhand. So yeah, we need to export a function that takes a Sequelize connection of a data type. So this is the poll file on the left hand side. So we'll export default function create poll model. It's going to take Sequelize, and it's going to take this data types object, which is kind of like an enumeration. And I'll say const poll equals Sequelize.define. Then we'll specify the table name poll, and then we'll specify the fields. This poll is going to have a question, right? Its type is going to be data types.string. And we know that we could do some validation here, but all I really want to make sure is that the value is not equal to null. I'm also going to specify a second options argument here and set time stamps to false. And then I think I just need to return the poll. And because these files are so similar, I'm just going to copy the text in the left pane to the right pane. We'll call this create poll option model. Rename those, and instead of having a question, the poll options are going to have some text, and they're going to have the exact same attributes. It's going to have a type of string, and it's not going to be null. Again, we don't want any timestamps. Next, we need to define an association between these two tables, and the way we do that using the Sequelize Connect module is by creating some class methods. We create one called associate that takes, I think, a models object, and then we say poll has many, and let me just turn off highlighting real quick. Poll has many models.poll option, and then in the other code file, we need to define the reference in the other direction. I think if you only define the relation in one direction, Sequelize will still create the foreign key on the poll option model, but some queries won't work as you might expect. So I like to do it just by default on both of the models. It's the exact same, right? We have a class methods property there with an associate function. We say poll option dot belongs to, if I can type, models dot poll. And we'll save both of those. To be honest though, if we look at the error that we got previously, I'll try and highlight it in editing. It says it's looking for a directory called /model, but I want to store my models in a directory called models, plural, because, well, there's multiple models in that directory. So I'm going to need to tell Sequelize where to find the models. Or not tell Sequelize, sorry, tell Sequelize Connect where to find my modules. Excuse me, my models. Models. I can't even point out the difference properly. That's a tongue twister for me, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'll insert, oh my goodness, I'm all over the place. I'll insert path from path, and then I'll write path.join. I'm going to want to take the current directory and join that with models. And what this discover property does, it tells Sequelize Connect where to look for the models. Let's try running the program. It seems to have, that's interesting. I don't expect this should work because for one thing, we haven't created the schema yet, but we don't actually get an error, which I find to be quite peculiar. Oh, I see what's happening. This is just a fail on, well, I wouldn't say it's a fail. I don't mean to be rude, but I feel like this is a bad API design. It's not actually finding any models because by default, this Sequelize Connect model, and I've come across this tripping obstacle or whatever a bunch of times, it always trips me up. It looks for models that are suffixed with the word .model, but I don't like to do that for my models. So I think I need to say db, and I honestly can't remember the name of the function. It's called, oh, where is it? Matcher, yeah. Again, it should be a verb really, but whatever. db.matcher equals function. This asks if we should import the model. It gives us the model file name, and it's up to us to import it if we want, or decide whether or not we want to import it. I always want to import the model if it was found in the models directory, so I'll just return true. Now if I run the code, see, it gives us an error. It's like, hey, you can't find the _vote schema. That could have tripped me up badly if I wasn't familiar with that pitfall. I'm going to create another tmux window called MySQL, and I'm going to connect to MySQL, and let me try and actually type properly again. I'm reaching over my microphone, so it's a bit awkward. My apologies. Let's see, if I write show databases, we can see that there is no such database inside the database instance. I'll write create database, what did I call it? _votes _schema. And now if I write show databases, we should see that that database exists. And here's the fun part. If we rerun the server, we don't get an error. And hopefully now, if we go back to the MySQL window and we say use and vote underscore schema, and we say show tables, we can see that both of the tables, polls and poll options, have been created. I like this command line utility for simple queries, but I actually want to verify that the association has been defined properly. So I'm going to bring out the big guns. I'm going to bring up MySQL Workbench. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate an EER model using this utility here. It's quite tedious. You just have to press next a bunch of times essentially. But eventually, once you've done all that, you can access this EER diagram. And as you can see, we've got a one-to-many relationship here saying that every poll has many poll options, which is perfect. Nice. Really, that's quite a good start. We can start to accept input from the user now via the API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill that or close that pane with the model. I'm going to create another pane on the right-hand side here. I'm really struggling to type today. I'm sorry, guys. What I'll do is I'll create a new file called, or rather a new folder called controllers. And inside of it, I'm going to create a controller for the poll. So poll controller.js. And this is where all of our express route handlers are going to live. So I'll say const poll controller, set that to an empty object. At the bottom, we'll export poll controller. And in between, we can set methods on the controller. So I can be like, hey, handle post. And we'll say this is equal to a function that takes a request, a response, and the next middleware to call if this route handler can't actually handle the input. Generally, we pass errors to that middleware function. Then within app.js, I can import poll controller and then define a route. So I can say app.post /API/poll. And then when a user sends a post request to that endpoint, I want to use this route handler to handle that request. I'm pretty sure that will work, so I'm not going to bother outputting some dummy text here. I'm going to need to reference Sequelize Connect. Like I mentioned previously, this Sequelize Connect module lets me access my connection from any file in the project after I've connected to the database. I want to say, well actually, first off, let me make this an async function. Then I can await db.models.poll.create, and I can specify the question, which is hopefully, well, I say hope, well, let me just write this code, then I'll explain. It should be in the request.body.question object. But the thing is, right, is we can't actually access that body property until we install the body parser middleware, the express body parser middleware. So let's quickly run npm install save body-parser, and it looks as though we've actually mistyped the path to poll controller. It should be ./controllers/poll controller. I'm also going to want to import the body parser middleware from body-parser. And then before the route handler, I'm going to call app.use and call bodyparser.json because we're intending to accept JSON input from the user. And with that said, I can then go back to what I was trying to say originally about how the question should be there. Let me create a new tmux window real quick, and I want to show you. I'm expecting the user to send a JSON object with a question property that's like, what is the best editor, right? And they also should specify the options for that poll. And that'll be in an array, probably a flat array where they can say something like Vim, Emacs, Atom, whatever. Sorry if your favorite editor isn't there. But obviously the user might not specify a question, or they might not specify any options. So I say, well, maybe they'll be there. You know, ideally I'd add some sort of validation, but what I'm going to do in this instance is I'm going to call db.sequelize.transaction, and I'm going to take the transaction argument because this function actually takes a callback, if you will. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack on here a catch function, which comes from the promise returned by a transaction function. And if an error occurs, I'm just going to call the next middleware, which will be an error handler in this case. So basically, if the user enters invalid data, they're just going to get a 500 internal server error, which is totally not ideal. Really, a good REST API should send meaningful status codes and messages to help the client understand what's wrong as quickly as possible. But due to the time constraints here, I think it's appropriate to send a 500 error. And Chris on the client is going to add input validation. As far as the practical aspect of it, only people who try and operate outside the bounds of the React client's application are going to be impacted by my shortcut here. So I'm not too worried about it. Anyway, we're taking a transaction now. So let's pass that along to the create function. This create function is going to return the poll it just created. And then what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to take the options supplied by the user and store those in the poll options table with a foreign key to the poll we just created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another constant called poll options. And right, so here's the thing, right? I'm expecting the user to send a flat array like this, but in order to store model instances via Sequelize, we need to have objects with text properties. So I'm going to need to massage that data a little bit. So I'm going to say poll options equals rec.body.options.map. And this map function is going to take the option and it's going to return a new object with a text property that is the option. But also I'm going to add onto that object the, let me just look real quick inside of Workbench just to make sure the property name is correct. The poll ID. So we'll specify the poll ID to be created poll.dataValues.id. These ID properties are just handled by Sequelize internally. I think that's fine if you understand what's happening. It's just really quite convenient. Let's see if I still get an error when I save the file. I do. It says unexpected token. Oh right, because the async keyword needs to be on the innermost function in this case, which is the arrow function we pass. Oh wow, so many errors. But you know, they look scary, but really it's just due to the fact that this ESLint config is quite strict. So it's all about padding and so forth. Poll options is defined but never used. That's exactly right. Let's use it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be like await db.models.poll option. I'm going to call bulk create because we could potentially have multiple poll options, and we're literally just going to pass poll options because that's in the perfect format. We're also going to pass a second argument with the transaction. If you don't know what transactions are all about, hopefully soon I'll have a video out about Sequelize transactions. But basically, if an error occurs between inserting these two records, to ensure the database is in a consistent state, we'll kind of roll back so that there isn't a record, there isn't a poll without any options in the database, for example. That looks pretty good to me. Where if everything goes to plan, let's send a status 201 to the user. 201 is the HTTP status code for created. Frankly, at the moment, what will happen if we encounter an error is the stack trace will get printed to the user. That's fine, we'll just let that happen for now, but I'll create an error handler soon. Let's go back and run npm run dev, and let's test this out. Let's see if I did fit this correctly. I'd be surprised if I did, but let's give it a shot. Let's minimize Workbench, and I'm going to open this utility called Postman. Again, there'll be a link to some of these tools in the description. Postman is an awesome utility for interfacing with REST APIs. I'm going to send a post request to http localhost, I think it was port 3000/API/poll. The body is going to be raw, it's going to be of type JSON. And as we do that, it adds the content type header, which is handy. The question, I'm sorry if this text is a little bit small. I don't think I can, I can't zoom this in unfortunately, but I think it should be legible in full screen. The question is going to be, what is your favorite editor? And the options are going to be Vim, which is what I'm using today, and Emacs. I'm just going to keep it simple with two options. Please don't start a war about which editor is better in the comments. Let's see what happens when I send this. We get a status 201 created and the message created. That's just Postman filling in the blanks really. We didn't send that text. And if we look at the database, I'm hoping to see if, oh, hold on a second. Let's go back to the instance of my database. I'm hoping to see that inside of the polls table, we have that one poll. What is your favorite editor? And if we look at the poll options table, we've got both the options, both have foreign key references to the poll. Awesome. So we can insert polls into the database. Things are really starting to take shape. So really next we need to be able to retrieve that poll back again. Oh no, hold on. As I said that, I realized in order for Chris to redirect the user to the just created poll, he is going to need the poll ID that was, the ID of the poll that was just created. So I'm going to send the status 201, and I'm also going to send a JSON object with the created poll ID, and we'll set that equal to created poll.dataValues.id. There's no need, well actually I say that, but yeah, let's test that this still works. The server should have restarted itself due to the fact that Nodemon is running. Yeah, this time we get a response that has the created poll ID. Awesome. So yeah, we need to allow the user to then query the poll back again using that given poll ID. So we'll create a new controller function here, poll controller.handleGet. we'll set this equal to a function that takes the typical arguments. This time, because we're not needing a transaction, I'm just going to surround this whole thing in a try catch, and if an error happens, I'm going to pass this on to the next middleware function. So I'll say awaits db.models.poll.find1, where id is equal to request.body.poll. Oh, no, actually, it's going to be, let's go to app.js, and we'll create a route for the poll, for getting the poll, and we're going to add on there a request parameter called poll id. Let's quickly rename this from get and this to handle get. And then we should be able to access the given poll ID via the params object. I think it's params, it might be query. I think it's params though. rec.params.poll ID. And once we get it, we'll store in a variable found poll, and we'll send it along to the user. So it'll be like res.status 200.json found poll.data values, just as a little test to make sure we're on the right track. So let's then go back to Postman and send a get request this time for the poll with the ID 1. Let's see what we get. So yeah, we get the poll ID 1, which is totally redundant, seeing as how we actually supplied it in the URL. But we also get the question. That's a good start, but we also need to attain the poll options. Using Sequelize, that's quite trivial, I think. We just need to add an include property and specify the model to be db.models.poll option. And hopefully this will bring with it the poll options. So let's rerun that query. So yeah, we see now the question, and we get the two poll options, Vim and Emacs, and we get their IDs, which is important to have on the client so that when the user votes on a particular poll option, that ID can be used to send a request to the server. But there's a lot of kind of redundant information here, and I'm going to actually refine the query by adding an attributes property to say that we only care about the question from the poll, and for the poll options, let's see, we want the text and we want the ID. So we'll grab the ID and we'll grab the text. Oh, I just noticed we got an error there. I forgot to put a comma at the end right there. So yeah, let's run this, and hopefully, yeah, the result is much more refined now. It's a lot easier to see the information that you need. Maybe ID is a bit too vague. I know it's sort of scoped by the poll options array, but I think it might be a bit more intuitive if I give that an alias. So do that using Sequelize. This is kind of the equivalent to using as in SQL, right? So I say ID as option ID and just surround that in an array. Again, let's see what this looks like. Yeah, we get the option ID. It should be really obvious to Chris now what properties to use to get the poll option ID. It wasn't exactly hard before, but I don't know. I think this is nicer. That's all, again, pretty good. I suppose now we want to enable users to vote on the polls, right? They can create a poll and they can view the poll, but no one can vote on it, and we can't see, obviously how many votes each option has because we can't even vote on polls yet. So just like we did previously for the poll, I'm going to create a new file called votecontroller.js, and it's pretty much the same story, right? Create an object called votecontroller, export the votecontroller, and on the votecontroller I can write methods like handle post. I should really create a snippet for this because I seem to be typing it a lot, but never mind. And by the way, just as a little, just in case you're wondering, it is possible to, for instance, put the method on the object like this. Like I could write function or something here. I don't do it. I prefer to do this because it reduces the amount of nesting in the controllers, but you can do whatever you like, obviously. So let's import db from Sequelize-connect. And then, again, this should be an async function. I'll await the result of db.models.poll.create. Oh, excuse me, no, I'm getting way ahead of myself here. So for one thing, that should be votes. But really, we haven't even created the vote model yet, so let's do that next. Just want to make sure that this error is out of the way so it doesn't conflict later on. Yeah, let's go to the models directory and create a file called vote.js. Again, I'm just going to reference the file we wrote earlier because they're so similar. There's no point duplicating all that text. So this is going to be called create vote model. This is going to be called vote. And then actually there are no properties for the votes right now. I anticipate that later we're going to need to add some kind of like voter IP property to keep track of voters to ensure that they don't vote on the same poll twice, but we'll deal with that later. Again, we don't want timestamps, but we do want to, and we also want to create an association. We want to say that the vote belongs to a models.poll option. And we also want to say we want to specify the relationship in the reverse, right? So we say poll option has many models.votes. Now, because we've actually updated the schema here and we've defined a new relationship, I'm going to need to forcibly drop and then recreate the database. And I can do that by specifying force to true. So that should basically drop all the database, all the tables, delete all the data, and then rebuild the tables with that relationship defined. And just like I did last time, for my own sanity, I like to generate an ER diagram just to make sure that I'm on the right track. So let's do that again. So we come here, we'll say create EER model from database. We'll press next, and it's very tedious. I wish there was a smoother and more efficient way to do this. I don't know, maybe there is. If you know one, let me know, please. Okay, right. Unless I've made it looks like something's gone wrong here. Am I looking at the right? I'm a bit concerned that I had two diagrams open. Hold on a second. For one thing, let me just make sure there's no error in the shell window. It says here, error occurred when connecting, reference error, poll option is not defined. Okay, right, let's look into that in a bit more depth. It's probably in the vote file. Oh, look at that. See, I'm trying to return. What's the point of having a linter if I'm not going to look at it? We need to return vote instead of poll option. That's my bad. Let's rerun the program again, and this time, hopefully, the relationship will have been created successfully. So I'm sorry, we'll have to go through that tedious diagram generation process again. It's not too bad, but not exactly fun to watch now, is it? So let's look at the diagram, and yes, okay, so we do have a relationship defined, and it looks correct to me. Awesome. Very good. So now we can go back to that vote controller we were working on, and I can say await db.models.vote.create. And what I want to specify, right, let's look at this. There's a poll option ID field that Sequelize generated for us. So I'm going to say that the poll option ID is going to be equal to whatever the request.body.poll option ID is, right? And if everything went to plan, we're going to send a status of 201 because we technically created a record. 201 means created, by the way. I mentioned that previously, but it's different from 200 in that it specifically means that the request was successful and a record was created. Again, I meant to wrap this all in a try-catch block just in case something goes wrong. And if it does, we'll pass the error along to the next middleware. Before we go any further, I will finish what I'm doing here, but I do need to remember to create the error handler middleware because it's not a good practice to reveal the stack trace to the client unconditionally like we are right now. So that actually could work as is, except for the fact obviously that I'm not referencing DB, but now I am. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Do I have, I don't think I do, a root set up, and I don't. So let's import votes controller from, again, that's probably why I did that last time with poll control. I'm so used to just referencing the module name when I install it via npm. But yeah, we'll reference vote controller, and then we'll say app.post /API/votes. And whenever someone sends a post request to that endpoint, we want to call vote controller.handle post. Make sure both those files are saved. Just make sure there are no errors. There aren't. If I go back to Postman now, let's see, I'm going to need to recreate the poll obviously because we keep dropping and recreating the tables in the database. But yeah, let's actually think about this like with the client just to see how far we've come. So as the client, we will create a poll with the user input. We get back this created poll ID. Well, the user just created a poll, so we're going to redirect them to the poll. We have the ID, so we can do that. We see that there are these two options with this particular question. And now say the user wants to vote on poll option ID 1. I have to vote on Vim because I'm using Vim, right? So I'm going to go to the vote endpoint, and I'm going to specify in the body that the poll option ID is 1. And if I run this, hopefully we see a 201 created. And again, I'm going to check in the database to make sure that firstly, the table's been created and its contents are accurate. So we've got this one vote with the ID 1, and it's referencing poll option ID 1. Cool. Okay, so we can vote on polls now. It's not perfect because the user, well, let me show you, the user could just come here and basically hammer the submit button so that now if we look in the table, there are like 1 billion votes, which is obviously stupid. It completely undermines the poll. But we'll fix that soon if we have time. What I want, the most prominent issue though really is that if you try and query the poll again, sure, someone's voted on it 20 odd times, but there's no indication of that in the results. So let's update the handle get function on the poll controller to actually send the votes that were submitted. So let's go to, what was it called? Poll controller. And inside of handle get, again, it's pretty much a case of writing include and then specifying the model, db.models.votes. And this should give us, I think this should give us an array of all of the votes. But before I do that, in fact, it's too late, but for future reference, I want to come up here and disable this force property because what happened was I just saved the file, so Nodemon restarted the server and the database was recreated, and so I have to come back and recreate the poll. It's really tedious, so I'm going to make sure I disable that option. So let's pretty much do what we did previously, create the poll, vote on it, and now, and I hope this works, if we query the poll, we can see there is 1 vote right here. And if I send the poll, if I send the vote a bunch of times and query it again, yeah, we see the votes a bunch of times. Oh, Emacs doesn't have any votes. Let's even up the score a little bit, give it a couple of votes and query it just to make sure things are all in order. So yeah, we can see the votes, but really this isn't very good at all. Yes, we do have access to the number of votes by virtue of this array. We can just look at the length, or we could do that on the server or the client, but this is generally just icky because we're loading all these records into memory, and if we were to send them to the client, that's even worse because we're just taking up unnecessary bandwidth. The most efficient way to do this probably is to use the count function in Sequelize, so let's see if we can do that now. Let's go back to Vim, and what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to want to group. I think it's in a, I think you do it inside brackets like this, but yeah, I think I'm going to group by poll options.id, and then I'm going to, by the way, just because I don't need this information anymore, I'm going to put the attributes array to be an empty array, and then I'm going to create another attribute here. I'm going to call it vote count, and it's going to be equal to whatever db.sequelize.fn. We specify the count function, and then I'm going to specify db.sequelize. I think I need to use call here to reference the column, and the column we're going to reference is poll options .votes.id. Got a little error there. It says parsing error, unexpected token. Again, I forgot the comma there. But having grouped by poll options.id and using the count function, if I rerun this query, we should see a vote count attribute. So yeah, it counts the votes now and gives us the vote count, which is 5, and in this case the vote count is 2. Right, so we've got 2 votes for Emacs. If we vote for Emacs one more time, it should go up to 3. Yeah, it does. So now Chris can use this data to show how many votes each option has and maybe make a fancy D3 graph in the future or something based on that information. It's pretty cool, but we still have this fundamental problem, which is that the user can come here and just vote over and over and over again, totally undermining the poll. So let's see if we can do something about that now. Obviously, this is an anonymous service, right? Which means we don't have a user ID or anything to limit who can vote and how many times. We're going to have to rely on the IP address, I think. It's a bit of a naive solution because, of course, there are proxies and VPNs and dynamic IPs and so on and so forth, but it's definitely better than nothing. So let's go to the vote model. And as we previously, we didn't really add an additional attribute. We just let Sequelize create that poll option ID attribute. We're going to specify the voter IP attribute to be a string. And we're going to specify allow null to false because it's mandatory. I know very well that I could come here and add some additional validation rules. I know Sequelize has validation rules for IP addresses and so forth, but due to the fact that this isn't user supplied input, and due to the limited scope of this project, I think that's more work. Well, it's more work. It's just not worth it, right? Basically. So yeah, I'm not going to bother. Oh, did that save? Yeah, it did. And because I'd made a change to the schema, I'm going to need to recreate the database. we'll restart the database ourselves, or excuse me, we'll restart the server ourselves in a second. But first I want to come here and I want to add to this object the voter IP, which is going to be equal to request.ip. I'm pretty sure actually that that's how you reference the IP. I'm almost positive that that's how you reference the IP, but I'm not so sure as to whether or not this is suitable for a production server, because as you're about to see, and I'm pretty confident about this, if I were to run the server and I were to, create a poll, we have to go through this again, I'm afraid, because we've recreated the database. We create the poll and then we vote on option ID 2 or whatever. If we look in the database at the votes table, we're going to see, colon 1, which is like, it doesn't look like a valid IP address, but it is. It's because we're on localhost. This is fine. It's okay. It's not a big deal. I just wonder if this was running on a public server, if it would pick up the IP correctly. I'm not positive. I've run into issues with that in the past, so I might need to change this code before I take this to production, but I can't really verify that right this minute. But yeah, that's a pretty good start, right? We can store the IP in the database, and really now it's up to us to check before creating a vote whether the user has already voted on this poll from the IP address. So let's go to the vote controller, and I'm going to create a constant called found vote, because we're going to look up the vote first. We're going to be like away db.models.vote.find1 where, and we'll specify voter IP to be rec.ip. But if we just left that as it is, what that would do essentially is it would basically check to see if the user with that IP has voted on any poll at least once, which is obviously daft. We want to constrain that further. So we're also going to look at the poll option ID. And we're going to want to make sure that, this is where things get a bit awkward, I think, because we need to do a subquery essentially. And to the best of my knowledge at this time, I don't think you can execute a subquery in this manner using Sequelize without reverting to raw SQL, which is less than ideal because we have to start obviously writing raw SQL and dealing with things like SQL injection ourselves. But I think in this case, that's our only option. Fortunately, Sequelize is quite cool about it. We've got this $in property, which allows us to specify a literal. So we'll say db.sequelize.literal, I think. And then we can specify our raw SQL query here. And that's going to return a table, obviously. That's just, I think SQL always returns a table. And if that poll option ID appears in this subquery, then the record is going to be returned, right? It'll be matched. So this subquery is going to be surrounded in parentheses, obviously. And we're going to say select poll options.id from poll options, put a space there, where poll options dot poll ID, we'll need to put another subquery here. Oops. And instead of this subquery, we're going to say select poll options dot poll ID from poll options where poll options dot ID is equal to, and then we're going to interpolate the request.body.poll option ID. I'm just going to save that. It doesn't look like we have any linter errors. I'm well aware though that I also need to escape this input to prevent against SQL injection. And using Sequelize, if this was a query function, which also takes raw SQL, there are additional arguments you can pass to the function. But with this literal function, I've done similar stuff to this in the past. You need to call db.sequelize.escape and explicitly escape the input. Okay, so if, excuse me, I need to cough, so I'm just going to mute the mic. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to say if found vote is equal to null, which means we did not find a vote for this poll by a user with that IP address, then we're going to actually create the record, and then if it was successful, we'll send that to a 1. Otherwise, we need to tell the user that, hey, you've already voted on this, you can't vote again. So we'll say res.status 400 to say that this was a bad request. There was usually status codes in the 400 range indicate that the user did something wrong, that it was a bad request. We're also going to send some JSON down the line with the message, you have already voted on this poll. I'm just going to double check this subquery just to make sure that I haven't got a trivial error with the query. Yeah, it looks okay to me. Let's go back to the shell and run this. I didn't need to do that really, but whatever. I'm just a bit confused really as to whether what the state of the database is. Yeah, so it's empty. So we'll need to create the poll again. Again, I'm just going to double check that because I'm a bit confused. Yeah, I've got 4 set to true when it should be false in this instance, just because we don't need to recreate it. That force thing always trips me up. It's really easy to lose track of where you're at when you're developing a project using Sequelize, using force, but never mind. It's not a big deal. In practice, you don't tend to update the schema that frequently anyway, so whatever. Let's create the poll, and then let's try and vote on poll option ID 1. We should be able to. Yes, we get a status of 201 created. If we vote again, I should be told, yes, I've already voted on this poll. But crucially, if I try and vote on Emacs, the other option, I shouldn't be able to vote on that as well. And I can't. Awesome. But just to make sure that that's not a bug, let's create another poll. Let's say, I don't know, what is the capital of England? And we'll say London and Manchester. That's got a poll ID of 2, but I can pretty much infer that the poll options ID are going to be 3 and 4 just because it's an auto increment ID. So if I vote for, say, option 3, I should be able to, and I can if I try and vote for option 4. I've already voted on that poll, so I should be told I've already voted, and I am, and so on and so forth. That seems to be solid to me. And really what we have now, guys, is like a really solid basic poll system. I guess there are a couple of things we can improve. So for one thing, I've been putting this off for ages. Let's create that error middleware handler I was talking about. Let's create a new folder. Let me show you the problem firstly, in case that's not clear. If for example I throw an error here, I say, let's just throw a string that says password, I don't know, just some kind of information here like foobar. It could be sensitive, and furthermore it can reveal implementation details about the server which an attacker could use to maybe look up exploits for a particular version of the server that you're running. So it's generally a bad idea to reveal details about your server to the outside world. But hypothetically, say this was an actual error of a call stack and it had information that was potentially going to be used to abuse the server. We don't want the user or the client to be able to see that information. But right now, if I throw an error inside of the vote controller and I try and vote on something, we get the error in the response. We get a 500 internal server error and the response. That's not really too good. It'd be even worse if we had, like a users table with actual sensitive data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder called middleware. And inside of this folder, I'm going to create a file called errorhandler.js. And very simply, this is really simple. I'm going to export a function that takes an error, the request, the response, and the next middleware function. I'm going to say, hey, if there's an error, send a status code of 500 and then send it with a JSON body that says an internal server error occurred. Otherwise, I guess we'll just call the next middleware function just in case it's like a 404 handler in the middleware pipeline or something. And then inside of app.js, we'll obviously import the error handler from middleware / error handler. And then at the very bottom here, you have to do this after your roots actually. We'll say app.use error handler. Now, if I go back to Postman and send the same request, we've got that same throw statement in there. We just see the text, an internal server error occurred, the call stack and the specific error message won't be revealed to the user. But obviously if, say, Chris is working on the client and maybe there's an input error, it's really hard for him to debug. So to help him, I'm going to write to the console the same text, an internal server error occurred, and then tack on the actual error. This way Chris can refer to the console. So again, if I run this code, we get the error. If we look at the shell, you can see at the bottom there, an internal server error occurred. I actually did a typo there. Oops. But I can help Chris further, and this is just kind of a neat thing I want to show you all. There's this really cool module called chalk. So I'll write npm install -- save chalk. And using chalk, I can very simply import chalk. And then all I have to do essentially is wrap the string in a call to chalk.red. There are other colors, and the error will appear as red inside of stdout. So I'll do that there, and whilst it's on my mind, I'm also going to import chalk from in the app.js file, and I'm going to surround this error message in a call to chalk.red, just to make the error message really prominent in the terminal. So let's try that again. Let's run the server. Oops. npm run dev. send this, we get the error. And if we look at the output here, it says an internal server error occurred, foo-bar. And the same would happen if the database couldn't be connected to. It just makes the error more prominent. I think that's really cool. Maybe you don't realize how easy it is to get colorized output in Node.js. It's kind of cool, right? One more thing that occurred to me as I was writing it, but decided not to actually deal with at the time, was that you could, I think at the moment, create a poll. Well, let me put it this way, right? If I've completely skimmed on input validation due to time constraints, but if the user didn't specify a question, what would happen essentially, and let me just do this before I talk about it in case I'm wrong. Yeah, what would happen essentially is that at some point in the code, it tries to access that question property. It doesn't exist, so we get question is not defined. It throws an error, and that's handled by the catch function returned on the promise object. But if we, for instance, create a poll with an empty options array, that will probably go through, and it does, right? Because we do have some constraints on the model that says that the individual options text can't be null, but there's nothing to say that that actually has to be an option. So I'm going to quickly code a little bit of, I'm going to add a little bit of validation here. I'm going to say if, let's see, request.body.options.length is less than 2, I'm going to say res.status 400 because it's a user error. We'll tack on the JSON message. You need to specify at least 2 poll options. And obviously I want to return, I could put this all in a big else statement, but to reduce on nesting, I'll just return here to make sure that if something goes wrong, we don't also try and store stuff in the database. Let's see if that worked. So it says here you need to specify at least 2 poll options. If I specify 1 option, nothing happens. If I specify 2 options, hopefully this goes through. Yeah, it does. So I think that's everything. I think I've given Chris everything he needs in order to start building out the client. In order for him to access the code, let's put this on GitHub. I have already made a GitHub organization called &votes, but I haven't yet created the repository, so let's do that now. We'll call it &votes, and I'll fill in the description and stuff later. It's not super important. I'm going to copy the SSH URL, and then within that shell window, I'm going to write git remote add origin, and I'll specify the remotes, and then I'll say, well, yeah, I would personally write GAA, which is an alias I have set up for git add the flag A and the dots. And then I can write GCM for git, well, again, I'm just going to show you so you know what I'm doing. I write git commit -- message, and then the message, I'm totally copying out here, calling it initial commit. It's done a lot more. I could really be more specific, but I think that's sufficient in this case. Yeah, that looks good. And so I should be able to just write git push origin master, and I'll enter my SSH password. I really need to configure my SSH agent properly, but whatever, I'll do that later. And yeah, the code should, and yes, it's on GitHub. Awesome. I'm going to star that just because I like to star things on GitHub, I guess. And now Chris can come and download this code and start building the client in the same project. I'll let you know off the bat that if you're collaborating with someone, generally it's more difficult to collaborate until the project grows a bit. Right now, me and Chris couldn't technically work on the project in the same moment because we'd be overwriting each other's changes. But as the project grows, there'll be more files that we're more likely to be working on separately. So I'm probably not going to touch the code now unless maybe Chris notices that I made a mistake. If Chris notices that I made a mistake, he'll tell me in private and I can fix that, and you might see that in his video. But yeah, in terms of live coding, we're pretty much done here. I'll see you in the conclusion.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that live coding session. If you're wondering what to watch next, check out Chris's video on his YouTube channel, Dev Coffee, where he picks up where I left off and mainly uses React to build a JavaScript user interface for the API you just saw me implement. Something I didn't mention but I should have is that between recording my live coding session and sharing the code with Chris, I wrote a bit of documentation in the README file to help Chris along the way. That documentation is in the GitHub repository, a link for which is in the description, so you can read the API documentation if you want to. Also, we've decided to put the website online. You can find it at www.andvote.com. Depending on the reception of these videos, me and Chris might upload a few more where we deploy the app to a server and add more interesting CSS. If that sounds like something you'd like to watch,
please make sure you let us know in the comments and or on Twitter. Again, check out Chris's video, it's great. Thank you very much for watching part 1 of live coding a JavaScript poll. I've been Alex Booker. You can check out my blog at booker.codes. I'm also on GitHub and Twitter if you want to follow me there. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to both channels, drop a like and share it with your friends on social media. Goodbye.
I need secrets to be a